Hey guys, Miss Gregory again. We are talking about comparing and ordering decimals, fractions, and percents. When they're all mixed up, they're not all fractions being compared, but the forms of the numbers are all mixed up, and you've got to compare them from least to greatest or be able to find out what's the greatest, what's the least. This goes with lesson 2.5 in the textbook, pages 129 to 132. Do you have your supplies? Get them now. You will need your book. You will take notes in the workbook. Okay, get your supplies. Pause if you need to. If you're ready, move on. Okay, a lot to write down here. Everything you see, you write. Big pencil is your reminder. Okay, we're in the workbook on page 130. And it is definitely important to get a common denominator. If you can find the least common denominator, then that's usually easier work on your part. But as long as you can find a common denominator, you're able to compare fractions. Okay? So notice the steps they tell you to find the least common denominator, or the LCD. Okay, there's several ways you can go about that. You can see if the smaller denominator will divide evenly into the larger denominator, or sometimes it's easy to think about your times table facts and find a number that they have in common. All right, write the second step, make equivalent fractions using your LCD. And then compare the numerators. That's the number on the top. Once the denominators are the same, you can compare the numerators to decide least to greatest. All right. So look at example 1. They show you the work. Denominators are 8 and 12. The least common denominator is 24. Okay, thinking about your times table facts and looking at the work over to the right where I have highlighted in a box and wrote in orange, show work. That's what you should be showing when you are finding common denominators and making the equivalent fractions. I want you to show your work like this. Okay, now you can see that 15/24 is greater than 14/24. Now you should stop, pause, try the got it's on your own. See if you understand how to do A, B, and C. Once you've done all three, come back and check to see if you have the correct answer. Pause your video now. Okay, you can come back and check your answers. I'm not going to show you all the work. You should know how to do this. I am going to give you a hint, though, for A, B, and C. You can see what I used as the least common denominator, and you should be able to make the equivalent fractions. You can see that A is greater than. Hold on, I think I made a mistake in writing on B. Okay, I had to fix my typo. A is greater than, B should be less than, and C should also be less than. You need to make sure you know the less than and greater than symbols, which way that they point, to say what you mean and mean what you say. A helpful way for you to remember is that your left hand makes an L, and that also makes the less than sign, and they all start with the letter L. Left hand, less than. The left side of the number line is less than the right side of the number line. So find a trick that works for you. Once you've checked your answers and see how I got mine, you may move on. All right, we're on workbook page 131. And it has a very helpful chart here, basically for you to know. If you can memorize these, and you already probably know some off the top of your head, but if you can kind of memorize this list and get a good understanding of the number sense with these, it will save you some time and work. And it's nice to have these at your fingertips instead of having to work it out every time. Saves you time on tests. All right, so good place to know is starting with this chart and memorizing them. All right, then we've got an example, number 3. you are comparing 3/4 and 7/10. All right, one is a fraction, one is a decimal. You have to get them to the same form in order to compare. It's usually easier to change the fractions to decimals. Okay, if you have two fractions, then you have to get a common denominator. But in this case, it's going to be easier to change the fraction 3/4 to a decimal. Most of you probably know off the top of your head 3/4 would be 75% or 0.7575 hundredths. Okay, so they didn't show their work. This is a common one, but look how the work is organized so that you remember that the 0.75 goes with 3/4. And you want to keep them decimals that have the same number of digits, so that's why they annexed a 0 to the 7/10. Now you can compare 75 is larger than 70. If you actually graph it on a number line, you can see which number is to the right and therefore largest, which number is to the left and therefore the least. Okay, so boxed in red, you have your answer. Okay, you can try the got it, D. Or I'm sorry, on page 131, you can try the got it's. There are letters E through J. There's another example 4 that's similar. I'm not going to put in the video, but you have it there in your workbook that you can use. Once you have copied what you need off this page and you're ready to move on, go to the next slide. Now we're on workbook page 132, and this is the last example before the guided practice. Okay, now you have a table, and you need to compare the numbers. They're in all three forms. One is a fraction, a decimal, and a percent. But you're going to have to convert those numbers to the same form. And again, it's usually best to convert the fractions to decimals. So in this case, it would be easiest to change all three numbers to a decimal and then make sure the decimals have the same number of places. Okay, so you're trying to find out which grade has the greatest part of the class attending the carnival. Once you know the greatest, technically you can stop, but you need to compare all three. All right, notice in the blue purpley colored boxes, I've highlighted how they've changed 5/8, 5/10, and 58 3/10%. It's important to keep up with your original numbers and what they convert to, because you always need to show the original numbers when you place them in order. Okay, so take note of how neatly they put that in order. They also graphed it to show you on the number line. The number furthest to the left is the least. The number furthest to the right is the greatest. So in this case, 5/8, which they got their answer as a decimal by dividing 5 divided by 8. You can actually work it out and compare. You should get the same decimal. Okay, now you try the got it K. Put your answer, come back and check to see if you are correct. Pause the video now. Okay, you can see my work here, but we did have to pull out the three numbers. 3/5 likes vanilla, 26% likes chocolate, and 1400ths prefer strawberry. The question is, which ice cream do students prefer the least? So we need the smallest number. Okay, 26%, you can see is easily changed to 0.26 using the pedal and the dipper method. I'm changing a percent to a decimal, so I'm going to pedal to the left 2 times. 3/5, I need to divide, or I could use one of the other methods of changing 5 to a denominator of 10 or 100. Either way works, and you would end up with 0.6. To keep all the decimals 2, I annexed a 0, and you can tell then that the least would be the 14% of the people that voted for strawberry. Okay, when you've copied everything here, I want you to move on to the next screen. And you are going to stop here on page 132 and answer all of the questions 1 through 4, and then I want you to rate yourself how well you understand it. Once you've done all of the problems, you can come back and check your answers to see if you were correct. Notice some of the things I underlined that are important details for you to pay attention to. Number 1 says write them in order from least to greatest. Be careful because sometimes they'll change it from greatest to least. So check your wording. Make sure you're always giving the answer to the problem. Okay. In question number 4, a sentence or two to explain yourself will work fine for that. All right. Pause. Work the problems. Okay. Only if you have worked questions 1 through 4 may you move on to the rest of the video. Okay, I'm going to show you my work for question number 1, where you had to order the fractions from least to greatest. You had to find a common denominator. The LCD was 20. So each one of these fractions were changed with equivalent fractions so that you can put them in order. Again, you have to remember you must arrange the original numbers, not what you have changed everything over to. So the original numbers in order from least to greatest you see boxed in here. 1/2, 3/4, 4/5, and 9/10. Okay, and my proof is shown above. All right, question number 2, you were comparing the Cora spends 2/3 of her time blogging compared to Leah, who spends 60% of her time blogging. Who spends more time? Well, you had to compare 2/3. Again, I'm going to change the fraction. It's going to be easier to look at these as percents or as decimals. So 2/3, you can see off to the side my division. It's a repeating decimal, so 0.66, 2 digits is all I need to compare the decimals here and see that 66 hundredths and Cora spends more of her time. Okay, go to the next page for number 3 and the explanation in the table of the team that has the greatest fraction of wins. All right, you can change all of the fractions to decimals. That makes it easy. 95%, again, percent to decimal, pedal to the left. 9/10 is easily written, and then 89 hundredths is already given. If you compare those 3 decimals, the one that has the greatest number is 95 hundredths, which is the Eagles. So the Eagles beat the Mustangs. Yay! Just like we're going to do in the next pep rally. Whoop, whoop. All right, and this is the end. I hope you wrote it down. If not, go back and do it. Signing out, Miss Gregory.